All right. So we are live with episode 30 of Axe to Grind. I'm joined tonight with special guest Pat Kilbane, who is an author, actor, comedian, filmmaker, a creator of Dreams in Gary's Basement, Gary Gygax, and the creation of Dungeons and Dragons. Pat, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Great to see you. Yeah, we've talked since it's been a couple years, I think, since I've seen your face, though.
It's
What?
been a while, yeah.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, Pat and I actually go way back. Back to when I was running The Escapist, and Pat put together a pitch for a show called Dark Secrets that we really wanted to do. It was a kind of a what did you say? Found footage meets the X Files.
Yeah, yeah, that kind of thing. It was an anthology series where there was some mysterious investigator who had disappeared, but this trunk full of his evidence was found in an abandoned warehouse. And so now what we as the documentarians were doing is assembling the stories based on his Super 8 footage and
Right,
diary notes and all
right,
that stuff. Yeah.
right. We had the awesome pilot that was done. It was like from the 70s, and was that like a? It was like set in the jungle with God. It's been 10 years. But it was like set in the jungle with like CIA vampires or something like that, as I recall.
Yeah. Well, we put together a teaser
Yeah.
and that was just awesome. We did shoot that with actual Super 8 and got it telecinied and it came out real cool. And yeah, it was in Vietnam. We had this we took some people over to this arboretum. It's this kind of botanical gardens or something over west of where I was in Los Angeles, and we had these Vietnam reenactors dressed as Viet Cong guerrillas, and we came in with tubs, like big storage tubs with AK-47s and grenades and
Amazing.
all that stuff. And to think about that, like in a post 9/11 world, is kind of like
Yep.
we're
Yep.
like, no wait, that must have been after
It
9/11.
was
But
post 9/11. Yeah.
pretty ballsy though. But anyway, yeah, we shot Super 8 footage of these guys crawling through the undergrowth with AK-47s, and they pick up like this alien skull and kind of
Right. That's right. That's right.
hauntingly hold it to the camera, and it just looks legit. It
It
was
did.
just super cool. And yes, we did really fun stuff with civilian, basically non-actors.
Yeah.
At one point, we
Yeah.
went to a retirement home and said, "Hey, anybody want to participate in this thing?" And yeah, we found a guy who looked like a cop,
Right.
and I kind of guided him through this story. I gave him bits and pieces and had him tell me things back, and then just through editing,
Yeah.
it just was this haunting. He found a body that had been incinerated and half absorbed into a wall of his home.
Right. Right.
And the guy was saying, I've never seen anything like it. And it was just so convincing. And I think in part because, senior citizens they've let go of their pretense and they're just very natural
Yeah.
kind of communicators.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was very interesting. I think had a lot of potential. So you were right to think it was cool. I was
Well,
so proud.
it ended up getting picked up by Discovery. So
Yeah, yeah.
damn them Hollywood film studios for outbidding my video game media company.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what happened, I guess. But it's not. We went to them later, though, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and so interesting enough, I ended up a couple years after that. I'm working in Los Angeles, and so I ran an ACKS campaign at Defy Media offices in Los Angeles. Pat used to come in and play, and so we would play in the Defy Media offices. We had like a gang of folks that
It
showed
was
up.
awesome. That
Kept
was
getting
awesome.
bigger every week. More people were showing up.
Yeah, yeah. You were a top-notch game master, I have to say. Yeah,
Oh,
just
thank you.
and obviously a master of the system as you wrote it. But it was just yeah. I think there were what eight of us or
Yeah, it
something
was about
most
eight
days, and
players. Yeah,
yeah, and the stakes were high, and it was intense fun. Yeah,
it was
great
good
time.
fun.
And you forget too, we did that Hollywood CryptoCast series that was basically lost footage. Like we had Aliens, the sitcom,
Uh-huh. That's right.
which was and what was the other one? Yeah, there was another sort of bizarre lost pilot of something that we did.
Yeah. Well, there was
And we did Falling Damage too, which was
Falling Damage was so
yeah,
good. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
which was super fun.
Yep. Falling Damage was so for again, those who don't know. So falling damage was like taking a look at the physics of role-playing games. So like, how much damage would you actually take from a 10-foot fall? And I believe the pilot episode was how many attacks could you actually make in a 10-second combat round, right?
Yeah,
And you
exactly.
went and you met with the dude. He was like a knife fighter. And yeah. And it was like 10 attacks in a round, right? It was just crazy.
It was pretty crazy. Yeah. That was super fun. And breaking it down frame by frame. And these were legitimate. Yeah, the knife fighting they were doing was actual sparring. So it wasn't like, it wasn't like forms, where you go here, I go here.
Right.
And the guy just had combinations, just like ba ba ba, where he would cut your wrist and then cut your chest and then cut your neck, and it was in the blink of an eye, like 3 attacks in a second. So if you're talking about even a 6-second segment, that would be potentially 18 attacks in a hypothetical maximums here. But I think even higher than that were the rattan sticks.
Yes.
And I think those hit like 6 times in a second.
Yeah.
But again, that's like you're calculating the limits of human maximums, at that point.
Yeah. I mean, and watching that episode just persuaded me that ultimately, when you roll that D20, you're not simulating one attack, right? You're simulating a flurry of attacks, because it just is not the case that only one attack is happening every 10 seconds or every minute or whatever. Like, it's just not what's happening in a duel. I mean, you had to slow it down to actually even see, like, you would just be like, dude, oh, and Pat's dead. And you're like, what just happened? Right. Like, oh man. And then the other one we did was Hero Metrics with Sam Swords, Trisha Hershberger. And we had
kind of a more evolved version of the same kind of idea years later. Yeah.
And we had the big spear. That was awesome, right?
Yeah, the idea there was the Frodo scenario, where Frodo with the mithril chain shirt gets hit by the spear of the cave troll, and even if the mithril stops it, would he have died anyway?
And we concluded he would have, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely crushed. Yeah. But that was I built that whole thing in my garage. I was like an insane man trying to meet the deadline, and had a big 6x8 or something, one of these big structural beams. And drilled a hole through it so I could put a weight bearing plate on it, and then we mounted a spear tip on it, and then hung it from the roof by ropes of the studio, and so you could swing it like a battering ram.
Right.
And what we did was simulate the not just the weight of the spear, but the big change that happens when a cave troll has a spear is what's called effective hand mass. Mm-hmm. So it's not just the weight of the spear, it's the weight of your hand, and a cave troll's hand is like ridiculously heavy. And so that's what it simulated. And Sam Swords, who's like an awesome HEMA practitioner, she geared up and just did an amazing job with that, and in full like combat kit. And Trish was a co-host, and it was fun. And I think we used the National Institute of Justice standards for backface deformation of soft armor.
That's right.
So we had the ballistic clay, and then the chain over that. And then we hit it with the spear. And the one big thing that happens is the crushing, of course. But the other thing is what's called a penciling injury, where the tip of the spear drives the armor into the body, basically.
Right.
So all the chains, everything just goes in, which is kind of horrifying, really.
Kind of gruesome. Yeah, totally. Now, I remember around that time, you actually started working on an RPG, like a physics-based combat RPG. Because I remember you and I, we would after our sessions, we would shoot the shit about like, okay, you're an ogre. What's your ideal weapon, right? And it was like, it turns out to be a fairly lighter weapon than you would imagine, right? You're a halfling. How effective are you actually in combat? And it turns out you're basically totally ineffective. Because,
exactly. I can't help but admire the work that you do, how dedicated you are, and how dedicated you have to be to write the hundreds of thousands. Has it crossed over into millions of words yet?
It did. Crossed over a million,
For ACKS. It's absolutely a colossal effort that requires a constant discipline. So I haven't gotten there, but I tinker incessantly with my own game system that I run for my friends. And you've seen the spreadsheets. I mean, it's a little insane.
It's awesome.
But yeah, that and I did that series RPG Science too, which is I did 10 episodes or something where I break down some of those principles on YouTube.
Yeah. Awesome.
But yeah, certainly a halfling, you're going to need a long weapon. You know, your ranged weapons, your bows are going to be horrible because the pull is going to be very short and very light to boot.
Yep.
Unless you have a halfling, everything would have to be upsized to like you'd have to have the equivalent of a heavy crossbow to do anything to bigger creatures if you're going to have the draw weight. But
so
yeah, it's my favorite thing to talk about with you, by the way.
I had this hilarious
game physics.
I had this hilarious idea that actually all fantasy worlds are actually what's actually happening is that everyone is half as tall as they are in the real world, right?
Right.
And they just have a different size foot. So Conan is actually 3 feet tall, but you know, to them that's 6 feet tall, etc. And then everything makes sense, right? Like, why are the monsters so much bigger? Right? You know, why can everyone survive these falls? Why are their weapons so oversized and they're so strong for their size? And it's all because of square cube laws. If you just have the size of all the humans.
Right.
So,
yeah, there's that thing where with insular dwarfism, which is the shrinking of creatures due to being on an island or something, their bodies are over-engineered.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So they have more structural support and strength than they need. For the job proportionally. And so that allows for all the things that you're talking about.
Exactly. And it explains like why are the trees so big, right? Like all the they're just normal trees, man. You know, why are all the mountains these huge, you know, cliffs? You're like, it's just a normal cliff, man. It's just everybody's tiny.
Right. I think that all adds up. I mean, from a whatever biological, zoological, whatever standpoint. I mean, that you know, there are people that small who are fully intelligent, fully
capable,
dexterous, and you know,
and
the whatever the hobbits, there's a branch of the human evolutionary tree.
That's right.
That is hobbit people, they call them.
Yeah, the Homo florensis. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we talk about game physics for an hour and a half, let's talk about game documentaries.
Yes.
Because you spent several years putting together the Dreams in Gary's Basement. This was you became the Stanley Kubrick of Gygax documentarians.
This was my Full Metal Jacket
yeah. So so it's now available. It's up on the site for everyone. It's in the description below if you want to check it out at the link. But tell us about it. Where did the idea come from? You know, what motivated you to do it? Kind of why Gary versus other creators?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you remember, and this is how influential you are and how recurrent you are in my creative history. Do you remember we were going to do it as a Playing at the World documentary for Defy? Do you remember that?
Oh, wow.
So so you were at Defy. We're doing all kinds of cool stuff together. And there was just so much tumult going on over at your office that eventually said, yeah, we can't, you know, and we explored like kind of different models for what it would look like and a budget and everything. And yeah, it just didn't happen for whatever reason, but we were so happy with the footage and I was so excited about the subject matter. It's just like, oh, you know, we kept going and, it built steam as we went. People became more interested and it was easier to get interviews and stuff. And,
of course.
And we ran a Kickstarter and had a $118,000 raise. So we were able to do some interesting things as far as animation graphics and licensing footage that would otherwise not be possible. But yeah, you know, I feel like Dark Secrets was in some ways my it was a seeing through of my own inspiration by Rod Serling. Like Rod Serling was one of my guys, and I was just inspired to do that kind of different version of Twilight Zone, basically.
Right.
And Gary Gygax was another much bigger inspiration than Rod Serling, insofar as I was interactive with this material from the time I was 10 years old, 11 years old. And yeah, there's, I think, almost like going to therapy. It's like, I want to understand more about this person, this thing that has had such a massive impact on my life, you know? And
Yeah.
in this case, it's a positive thing where normally in therapy, you're like, let's explore like the family's
Right. Exactly.
whatever dysfunction. But so that made it, I think, especially magical for me, you know,
Yeah.
because and you know, they have this horrible saying, I think, don't meet your heroes. I think
Right.
it's the opposite. I think you have to be an adult enough to let the scales fall away and see your heroes for the human beings that they are, and revel in all the possibility that you know, you have your own life adventure to live, as and to watch the extraordinary journey that they lived, and you know, aspire to do that yourself, but without expecting that they're not going to have made any mistakes. But
Right.
so I was extremely satisfied in that regard, and actually felt like the things that he went through, I felt a real kinship kind of with that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I've never done cocaine or like, you know, whatever. You know, I haven't made the same mistakes necessarily, but you know, having lived and worked in Hollywood and having, you know, been a creative for my whole career, it's like I feel like I look at the situations he was in and think, I get it. I get
Right.
it. You know, I
Right.
understand exactly, you know, what he must have been feeling at that time. And of
Right.
course, I can't know for sure, but you know, I have a pretty good idea.
Right. Because you were a Midwestern guy. You pursued your dream. You went out to Hollywood as a creative, Mad TV. You saw some shit, I assume, out there.
Yeah,
Nobody gets out unscathed.
right. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and I started as a stand-up. I did the road for 4 years before I moved to LA, and then it was, you know, kind of TV commercials and a couple of guest stars, and then Mad TV for 3 years, and a DreamWorks deal that was a couple of years, and movies with Will Ferrell and Eddie Murphy and all this stuff. And this is not me tooting my horn, but sort of impressing upon your point that I had enough of a run in with fame and the difference between the Midwest, you know, whatever, heart of America, and then Hollywood,
Right.
you know, and everything that is. And it's
Right.
very exciting and offers a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of stuff about it. There's this corrupting and gross, you know, so you got to constantly navigate that. But you know, I feel like, and the biggest thing, the biggest education was doing a lot of projects with a lot of different kinds of people.
Hmm.
You know, there are people who are above me in the totem pole, below me, being a tiny part in a giant project, a giant part of a small project, you know, all of that. And you start to have the Malcolm Gladwell pattern recognition of,
Right.
you know, kind of what's going on. And you know, so with him and Dave Arneson, for instance, and you know, I don't want to ruffle feathers, but I feel like in some ways that was a case of I may have mentioned this in the last time we talked. First rodeo syndrome is what I call it.
Mm.
And you know, when it's your first go round, and there's things get big and exciting, or at least have the potential to be,
Right.
people get very precious. They get precious about it. They're like, oh, you know, what about my money? What about my credit? You know, what if this becomes absolutely enormous? Will I be in a position? You know, and there's all of this fighting sometimes before there's even anything to fight about. You
Right.
know, and so what happened between Gary and Dave was a very normal dynamic. You know,
Yeah.
it was a very typical response, I think, to a first rodeo.
Yeah.
And it was a first rodeo for both of them, but I think more so for Dave because Gary had already been in, you know, he was already working at God on Games and he was older. He had kind of a more of a sense of how to
Right.
run things, you know.
Right. Right. Well, what do you think about Gary and the Blooms? So
Yeah. Yeah.
was that as sort of run of the mill, or was that more corporate treachery, or because they were
Yeah.
buddies as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. He and Brian were, and Brian was a gamer. And this is
Yeah.
something we talk about in the movie. Brian was legit very interested in games and role playing. And
Yeah.
I think he really saw the magic. And it was Kevin, his brother, who kind of didn't get it, I think, and was, you know, just there for a job, essentially.
Yeah.
But I think part of what was going on. Oh, well, I can go really into the weeds here, and a lot of it is speculation. But I think that with Gary coming from a place of such lack in his life, where he was completely broke, he had all of these obligations with his big family. When the money started to roll in, it's hard not to be like, okay, like your grandparents who grew up in the Depression. It's like,
Yep.
Grandma, why are you keeping those old inner tubes or
Yep.
whatever? That's like, they're perfectly good. You never know when you're going to need them. And similarly, I think that Gary would be like, okay, well, let's get Ernie a job, and let's get Heidi a job, and let's hire all our friends, and let's kind of keep the money, turning.
Yeah.
So I think that, and again, that speculation, that may have been part of it. And of course, the other part of it is, when you have to staff up and you're new to this, you're going to go with people who are familiar to you.
Absolutely.
And so,
yeah.
And so that was part of it too. And I think, had it not been Kevin, had it been just Gary and Brian and some other maybe, smarter, more game smarter person, they might have done much better. But yeah, I think that, and I think Gary was doing that, and kind of the Blooms were doing that. There was like sort of it was almost a race to like extract, not like to take from the company, but to benefit.
Yeah, of course.
So, but that to emphasize that too much, I think, takes away from Gary's real brilliance, because I think he was an absolutely brilliant leader.
Yeah. So we got a couple questions, actually. So first,
oh wow, okay.
John Miller wants to know, where can we watch The Dreams in Gary's Basement?
Okay, two places. You can go to rpghistory.net, and you can buy it streaming there, or if you go to if you go to our Kickstarter page for The Dreams in Gary's Basement, the button there allows you to order the box set, which is like, I got to send you one of those, Alex. It's fantastic. There's the movie, the featurette, and the director's commentary, and then there's like 9 hours or 8 hours or something like that of extended interviews.
Awesome.
So like Flint Dilley, Frank Menser, Mike Carr, friends and coworkers of Gary, Peter Adkison, Merle Rasmussen, So those are the two places. And if you want the maximum experience, is that Blu-ray box set. It's just awesome. We spend a lot of time making that quality.
Yeah. Actually, we should talk a little bit about the list of folks you got interviews with is phenomenal. So you mentioned a few of them. We got Merle Rasmussen, creator of Top Secret, if I recall.
Yes.
Peter Adkison, creator of Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering.
Right.
So kind of a big deal. Who else was on the list? Frank Menser, who did the basic through Immortals set, also kind of a big deal. A difficult man to keep happy, by the way, Frank Menser is.
Is that? I found him. I've had nothing but good experiences with him. You mean like post, like recently, or?
Oh, he's supposedly a grumpy curmudgeon is the joke on Facebook. So I've never chatted with the guy. So
I got on great with him, and awesome. And I could kind of see it. And people say the same thing about Jim Ward and Tim Kask, and I don't know, maybe that's just a function of having seen so much, But I feel like the big three were Luke Gygax, just having the perspective of somebody in the family, and then Frank Menser and Tim Kask, the two right-hand men, in the first half and the second half of the TSR era for Gary. So those, and then Mike Bernard, who was a play tester and who grew up in Lake Geneva, was just a wonderful interview. And not as many people know his name as like the Mount Rushmore of TSR, but he was a compelling interview. Who he knew both Dave and Gary. Right. He played both in Lake Geneva and in the Minnesota Contingents games. So he brought and Mike Carr also had that dual experience.
Wow.
So yeah, it was super fun, and I talk about that in the featurette, just what a thrill that was. I mean, The B1 module was my first that I had ever played when I was introduced to D&D. And so Mike Carr was kind of a mythical figure to me in some ways, you know. And
that's awesome.
yeah, and we went to, he has a house on an island on a lake in rural Wisconsin. So I likened it to going and seeing like when Matthew Broderick goes to see Dr. Falcon in War Games,
right?
You know, where it's like this, you have to go see this genius in this like remotest possible location. And it was just so cool. It was so fun. And we got to talk to Len Lakofka at his home before he passed away. And it may be the only HD interviews in existence with Len. And he had a lot of interesting things to say about the early days as well.
So you had already read, you know, Peterson's book by the time you did the
yes, devoured it, underlined, annotated.
So you had a lot of knowledge of it, and you know, like me, you were Gen X. I think you're 4 or 5 years older than me. So, what surprised you when you went and you did the documentary? Like, at what point were you like, "Oh, I didn't expect that was how it played out"? Like, was there any moment that really kind of made your head pop?
Well, I think the thing, and I mean, I think I knew most of the facts after having read Playing at the World. The thing that surprised me, like even starting the documentary versus having begun it, was how down and out Gary was. Like the real financial straits that he was in when he, developed the game. When he,
Really?
I was completely unaware that he was on food stamps and cobbling shoes in his basement, and they were just having a really tough time of it. Mary's jarring vegetables and and they had a plot of land where the family was growing food, and then Mary would take the stuff and can it for the off season. And he was taking factory jobs, Gary was, and stuff. And they had animals. They had a dog and maybe multiple cats, and then the 5 kids. And that house is little too. So I just, the rags to riches thing is kind of literal. I mean, Mike Bernard talked about Gary had flannel shirts going through at the elbows, that he'd wear. And Len Lakofka talked about when they would come over to play games, they would bring food with them, because they knew that the family needed it. And that just made me, I mean, as a filmmaker, that's exciting because, wow, this is the hero's journey. This is like Act 2 is the other world, He goes from this to that, and it's starkly different, and he has to make his adjustments. And the other part, as a human being, I'm like, wow, good for him. Wow, good for that man, believing in himself and believing in his ideas and going for it in a way that so many people are afraid to go for it,
Right.
And just completely inspiring. And it made for a great 3-act story. It's a perfect, the guy did a hell of a job living his life. He really did.
Yeah. And so you don't think of it as a tragic story then?
I don't, and I think that, gosh, my head's going in a million directions. How this is with the various rabbit holes that you can sort of dive down. I feel like when you really zoom out, Joseph Campbell talks about there's the going away, you go to the other world, and you come back.
Right.
You have to come back.
Right.
And one of the things he talks about that I definitely identify with is when you go to an other world and you stay there, it's like camping by the Chernobyl site. It mutates you, it changes you, and then the benefit of all that you have learned, the boon that you bring back to society, is not brought back to society. So I feel like Gary went on his hero's journey and he came back to himself. That what is the expression, like knowing that place for the very first time, like coming home and knowing that place for the very first time.
Right.
I feel like, God, in life, I heard Jerry Seinfeld say this in an interview. In life, you just got to feel like you took your shot, your shot. And that's saying yes to the hero's journey, but you gotta come back, or you just end up being like, I'll just give you one example. I remember, was it Robert Blake? there was all of that scandal. What his girlfriend or wife was shot and killed us at a restaurant. Did he do it? You know, what other
Right.
shady characters were involved? And so he was doing kind of an interview circuit, I think, after being exonerated.
Right.
And he was talking about, I just want one more part. I just want just one more, just one great role. And I remember thinking, this guy, he doesn't let it go. You know, he was in his 80s, you know, or whatever he was. And it's like he's still, part of his brain is still in that, you know, that mode of I just gotta show off, or I just gotta, you know, prove myself, or and I think that Gary did all that, and then he came home and had a very you know, he was still writing games, but had a really regular, in a wonderful way, really regular life. You know, it was a beloved character.
It's interesting. So, because I know you did that. You went to Hollywood. You did awesome things, and you've actually moved back to the Midwest, right? Like, you had your hero's journey, and you went home.
I did, yeah. You know, and
was that purposeful? Was that like a conscious decision in the same way?
I mean, no, you know, it's funny. Joseph Campbell talks about, you can tell I'm a fan of Joseph Campbell. Yeah. Joseph Campbell talks about that too, where when you're involved with something, whether it's your job or, you know, whatever it is in your life that is so important to you.
Yeah.
When you feel that thing is starting to pull away from you, what you don't realize is that you are also pulling away from it, you know, and I think that that is a key realization that allows you to own the separation from this thing that was so important to you, or you thought was so important to you.
Yeah.
And with Hollywood, you know, going back to that other world and the corrupting force of the other world idea, I feel like living and working in Hollywood is kind of akin to being in porn or being a drug dealer. It's like, I'm sure there are people who are well-adjusted who do those things, but that's the long tail. You know?
Right.
It's like most people, you know, in those industries, like Hollywood attracts people that are broken. And if you go there healthy, you're so often around broken people that it's a corrupting force. It's constantly inviting you onto the hamster wheel, and constantly looking over your shoulder and judging you for what you're doing right now. Just a quick demonstration of that I felt was, I was shooting Semi-Pro. I was in that movie, that basketball movie with Will Ferrell.
Okay.
It was about the ABA. And since I'm a tall guy and a comedian, so I played the bad guy.
Because you're like 6'6"?
6'5", yeah. But that's anytime a comedic basketball player came up, I was like, okay, I got to go on this audition because there's only so many guys who could really do this thing. But I remember being on that set, and that's one of the few times you can really feel comfortable as an actor. It's like, okay, I've got the job. I'm working it right now. I can't beat myself up. If people ask me at parties, what do you do? And it's like, I'm shooting the movie now. And then somebody asked me, well, what's next for you? I was on the set. Someone on the set was like, what's next for you? I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know. Then I booked a movie with Eddie Murphy.
Okay.
All right. So I'm on the set shooting Semi-Pro, and I've got this Eddie Murphy movie coming up, and someone's like, oh, what's next for you? It's like, yeah, I got an Eddie Murphy movie right after this. And then he's like, how about after that? And I'm like, okay. You know, so there is no winning on this, you know, that the satisfaction's got to, you know, kind of come from inside. And I think the first big, I don't want to stray too far away from the game and Gary stuff,
no, it's
but
good,
it's related, I suppose. The moving away part was first manifested, I think, in the Brain Eater's Bible, which is a zombie book that I wrote and that you're familiar with. And we were actually developing a mobile game based on the Brain Eater's Bible with you and your company, which I was so excited about at the time. That was the first thing that was really complex, really ambitious and involved, that I saw through exactly the way I wanted it to be.
Right.
And for people who don't know, it's it's an autobiography of a zombie who's explaining to other zombies how to survive. So it's like the mirror image of the Zombie Survival Guide by Max Brooks.
Right.
And it is it is fully illustrated with live action photography. So it is like 150 pages of pictures of zombie attacks and rusty machetes, and these are the guns that you may see in humans that you're trying to kill, and so there's a list of all the different shotguns and rifles and what the pitfalls are, and you can really see the game designer in me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really built a game world effectively with that. But I guess the point I'm making is I saw that through and was so proud of it. And I'm like, this is how I have to work. I can't go audition for somebody's thing.
Right.
That, is if the part's good, the project might not be, are you even going to get it? And I found that there was a 2 order of magnitude sort of filter. There was like, let's say you book 1 in 10 auditions and 1 in 10 projects is worthwhile. That's like 100 auditions per worthwhile project.
Yeah.
And I just found it infinitely more satisfying to see things through of my own creation.
Yep. Yeah, I went through that really early in law. I have such a distinct memory for me is I had lined up a job at the highest paying law firm in the world, which was Wachtell Lipton, an M&A firm. And so my last semester of law school, it's like I'm done, right? Like I've got the job offer.
Right.
So I'm just farting around. And so I'm like, I'll take this class on internet and society. Wow, right? And what's the internet? And so we get this guest professor for the day who's a 20-year-old college dropout. And he's like started ragingbull.com, went public, had an IPO, and now he like chills out on yachts with supermodels. And I'm like, I want to be chilling out on yachts with supermodels. So, what are the opportunities for lawyers in the new economy? And this kid says, oh yeah, I hire lawyers all the time. And I was like, oh shit, that's going to be my life. I'm going to be the guy on the other side of the desk getting hired by the guys that take the risks.
Right.
Not going to be in control of my life. I'm going to be the one that takes the call, not the one who makes the call.
Right.
And I was like, I don't want to do that. That's not who I want to be. And so I called up my brother and I was like, bro, we're starting a .com. And he's like, okay, what's the .com? I don't know. It's going to be something game related though. We'll figure it out. Right. Like it was just this moment of clarity that I didn't want to be in that place. I wanted to be controlling my destiny to the extent that I could. Now, as it turns out, controlling your destiny proves to be a lot harder than you think.
Right? It is. You have to do it all. That's the downside.
Yep.
It's that you want to be the parent or the adult, or the child or the adult. The child's like got it made and play all day, whatever. Yep. The parents got to pay the bills and all this stuff, but who has the agency?
That's right. That's right. And what I didn't realize at the time, because I was young, right? When you raise money and you take money from investors, it's not that different than having that guy as the client of the law firm,
Right.
It wasn't. And then of course you sell the company because you have to exit. That's the point of starting a company. And so then, you have a boss that you've exited to, and then now they're pulling the strings. And it wasn't until I had Autark that I finally was like, okay, this is true. This is truly controlling my destiny. And it turned out that controlling my destiny involved, eating out a lot less and doing my own housework.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what bootstrapping looks like. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's what is it? What people don't want to, was it Edison who's like, people don't want to succeed because success looks like coveralls or something, like it looks like hard work basically. And so that's, people don't want to do, but I have to say, I worked with you in LA in the Defy offices, and also, I don't know if you remember, I came to your offices in North Carolina.
No, I remember you coming to visit us.
To me, and I think we did a short game session there too, and it was just fantastic. I was so impressed. You had this awesome, like, big kind of industrial loft looking space, the big high ceilings and the ductwork, and and it seemed like, wasn't it a kind of a cool, there's sort of a promenade area.
Yep.
It was just a very hip, just awesome, energetic place that you had set. And I saw, the people working for you and stuff. And I'm imagining that while you're enjoying the autonomy and the agency of running your own company, kind of yourself and handling it yourself, all of those people working for you who just loved what they do must also, that would be the one thing I think I would miss. So you created this, you're Willy Wonka, at The Escapist, and
I was,
and I was the beneficiary of that in some ways, doing fun projects that otherwise wouldn't have been available to me. And it's very, you did extraordinary things, and I think that. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just said it's kind of you to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about is the two things, and this kind of circles back to Gary Gygax. You have to have whatever that bug is that says, you know what, I'm just not going to settle for what other people are telling me to do. I'm just not, no matter how potentially humiliating it is, no matter how hard the work it is, I've got to find a way to make this thing my own, or I just can't deal. I just, so there's that independent entrepreneurial streak.
Yeah.
And then the passion, you chose games, you chose the one thing you always wanted to do. And Steve Jobs talks about that. How if you don't have the passion, you will not have the stamina to go through the deep bullshit that you have to go through to make your own thing happen.
It's true.
So, and that's what Gary had. Gary had the sort of the obstinate ambition and self-determination, and he had this deep passion for games and game design.
Yeah, and it just shows. It just shows in his work. So we got a couple questions here. Let me throw them up.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. My buddy Bradford Walker says, is there any information on how the hobby social element was organized between Chainmail and Gary's ouster from TSR?
The hobby wow. Gosh.
So I'm not quite sure what Bradford means. So maybe why don't you elaborate what you're asking, and we'll do another question.
The social element.
So John asks, does anyone have insight into the evolution of Gary Gygax's religious and political beliefs from clean-cut Jehovah's Witness in the 60s to hippie biker libertarian in the 70s?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think John Peterson, a number of historians have talked about it, but he was kind of a wild child. And this goes back to high school. He was the guy, he dropped out of high school. He was kind of a little bit of a roughneck, the leather jacket sort of crowd back in the 1950s. And not that he was in a gang, but that was, he was an outsider. And when he got married, Mary, his wife, actually Mary was the one kind of driving the Jehovah's Witness train. She actually was not a Jehovah's Witness. She became a Jehovah's Witness, is my understanding. Became a Jehovah's Witness as a means of kind of getting a handle on Gary. It's like we need rules, we need structure, we need some kind of a calming, organizing force here, which is actually in some ways it's a great reason to get into religion, and for a while he was on and off about it. If you in the Lake Geneva Regional Times, I'm trying to remember what the name of their paper is, there were announcements of Gary Gygax is hosting a kind of a Bible study. And there was at his house, and he was the guy running it. So you already see kind of the leadership that he just sort of, transfers over to this religious activity. So he, in a lot of ways, was very involved. And at the end of his life, he kind of became re-involved. Flint Dilley talks in the extended interviews about how Gary was sending him Bible passages, and Flint didn't even know he was a Jehovah's Witness. And Flint was like, what's with the Bible passages? And Gary went into it, explained, and Gary was close to the end of his life. And that's a time when we get deep, we start really reflecting on what it all means. But Gary's independent streak would not tolerate the sort of confines of Jehovah's Witness
Right.
that church's requirements.
Right.
So I believe, he had the long hair, he had the ponytail, sideburns, but it was, I believe, the smoking that was the last straw for them. And he smoked until he had his first heart failure visit with the doctor, I think, and then he switched to cigars, if I'm not mistaken. So and this is something interesting Flint Dilley talked about too, was that a lot of intensely creative people are religious people.
Yeah.
And the name's escaping me, the C.S. Lewis, and Ray Bradbury, apparently. And I'm just parroting what Flint was saying in that interview, but I thought that was an interesting insight.
The relationship between Flint and Gary has always been interesting to me because they were very close friends. Flint is the one who recommends Lorraine Williams to take over his sister to take over TSR. And Lorraine, more or less is the villain of the story in many ways. She's the one who takes the company from Gary. And I have to imagine Gary didn't take that well. And yet, from all accounts, Gary and Flint stay close friends.
Right. Yeah. They stayed in touch. He said it was less. He said it was less after TSR, but they were still fairly regular correspondence. And all the way, Flint said that he may have been Gary's last business call. Flint was talking about doing a story of Gary's life, and had talked to some Hollywood bigwigs, and Gary was like, "Oh, great," and that was the last time he talked to him before he died. But that it's obviously it's all very complex. But Lorraine was brought in to help with the company, not specifically to, she was brought in. She was extremely intelligent and trustworthy insofar as she was highly competent,
Right.
And there were a lot of fires to put out at that time, and she was helpful. And I think they were initially, if I'm not mistaken, trying to get her to put money into the company. But her working there was kind of a condition of that. Kind of let me kick the tires on, help out, and the breakup of the company was, gosh, I mean, that was a very convoluted thing too. It's hard to fully wrap your head around the complex series of events that led to that. But evidently, she she believed that Gary, there was no dealing with him, and that my impression was that she felt, we just can't. And you've probably been in that situation business wise, where it's like, we just can't sit down with this person, and we're just not going to be able to figure it out, So
that was going to be my next question. Was there a possible future where Gary swallows his ego and says, "I'll be the creative guy," and Lorraine runs the business, or was Lorraine intent on pushing Gary out? And it sounds like.
Now this is. I think I read this in John, and a lot of this I'm going to have to give you this sort of caveat that a lot of what I'm telling you is what I've learned from John Peterson's books. There's an interesting podcast called "When We Were Wizards" that is full of great information, although I feel like it's kind of a tabloid criticism of Gary as opposed to a celebration of him. But it fascinating, so I recommend that as a listen, as long as you kind of have your radar up for the bias. I'm sorry, I just lost the point there.
Could Gary have stayed at? Could there have been a different way?
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Evidently, Lorraine tried to do that. There was some kind of, when she took over, there was some kind of a deal where you'll get royalties and you'll get this and you get that, and still be involved, and that was where Gary had a real opportunity for doing exactly what you're talking about, but he was too I guess I don't want to put a label on it, whether it was anger or he was obstinate or whether he was proud or just confused by the
course of events.
But he didn't take it, and then when he ended up losing in court, he lost. I mean, he was in a much worse position than had he taken what was offered to him at the time.
Right.
So, I imagine that's a double tough one. It's like watching Deal or No Deal, where somebody, has a chance to walk away with a big basket of money, and they end up walking with, kind of
Yeah.
nothing, But,
Yeah.
but, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that there was an interesting thing that I wanted to make a point of saying, and this goes back to my own experiences in Hollywood, that people want to paint Gary as having gone out of control in Hollywood, or
Mm-hmm.
being a flawed man. But I think that's a terrible way. Like, when I think of a flawed man, I think of somebody like Steve Jobs, who's like an inspiration, a visionary, a one of a kind leader, all this stuff, but a sociopath. He burns every bridge with every person, his friends, his family, everybody. Or John Belushi, he's like, oh, everybody loves him. This iconic once in a generation performer, can't quit drugs, just can't do it. We end up losing him early. But everybody loves Gary. That you talk to all the people he worked with, the people in his life, his family, that there is none of that bitterness. There is just a lot of warm recollection
Yeah.
that makes me believe that he was a good guy. That he had these qualities that you have to be an entrepreneur, but outside of that, he was good to people, and very well remembered. And I think that the Hollywood part of things, there's this horrible saying that fame or money just makes you more of who you already are. So it's like somehow being famous exposes what was always going on underneath. And I think that's bullshit. It's not my experience. And I think that'd be like saying rabies just makes dogs more of who they always were.
Right.
And it's like Old Yeller was an asshole all along, that's kind of had it coming at the end. But
oh no.
but I think that the way people have to look at it is like fame and money are a terribly disorienting force.
Right.
And so whatever your sense of self is, it's going to be completely rocked by a sudden increase in one or both of those things.
Yeah.
And you got to kind of find yourself again. And even if you're doing a great job of finding yourself, other people are treating you completely different. Which is like having vertigo on a tilt-a-whirl or something, where it's like, it's not just you, it's the world underneath your feet. And it's almost impossible to figure things out without making a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And so I feel like whatever excesses he had or missteps he had, it's so much, it's understandable and forgivable and completely normal.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever, somebody is coming home from the hospital and they're walking crooked because the anesthesia hasn't worn off yet, and you're criticizing them for walking crooked. It's like, no, this is just what happens. Yeah. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you compare sort of the alleged stories of Gary in LA, given, he's a multimillionaire in LA in the 80s, like the stories of what he did are so tame compared to the stories you hear of the true scoundrels of that era. I mean, this is an era of legendary debauchery where, like people in the 2020s look back in horror and awe at like, I mean, and I saw some of it even when I was in the video game industry at its height, right? Like I won't say it, but there was a video game publisher that used to go to E3, and they had a 2-tiered pavilion. And they had the bottom tiered pavilion at E3 was for the schlubs, and then the top tier was for the journalists and whatnot, and the top tier was for the buyers at GameStop and Best Buy and whatnot. And the
so
top
like a literal physical stratification.
Physical stratification.
Oh my gosh.
And when you get up to the top tier, they had hookers and drugs. And it was just like, come on up. And, and wow, that game got a lot of orders,
Right.
I mean, that was just how business was done then.
Right.
And I don't think it's still that way. I don't know, but it was definitely just how it got done in that era. And that and that was in the early 2000s. It was tame compared to, prior, and games is way tame compared to Hollywood.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, anywhere there's so much money in games, or at least certainly during the heyday, and there still is. But yeah, where there's money, there's going to be those excesses,
Absolutely.
and I think it's the point you're making about the '80s too. People don't understand. I mean, the way that we look at cocaine now is completely different. I was watching a documentary called "Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead." Have you seen
Yeah.
that about
No,
National
no.
Lampoon? It's about the rise and fall of National Lampoon. It's really well done.
Yeah.
And Tim Matheson, who was in Animal House, was talking about cocaine, and he's like, "Wow, here's this drug. It just makes you feel great, and then the party goes on, and you just and it was like, I can't believe this isn't bad for you. That's what they were thinking. It's like, I
Right.
can't believe this isn't bad for you. They hadn't fully seen the ravages of
Right.
that yet. And
Right.
I think the other big thing is that it was, and Danny Trejo talks about this. Um, there was a guy that he was, I think, helping through addiction, and he was talking about how in the '80s cocaine was so everywhere that it was like it was out in the open. In the '80s, it was like craft service.
Yeah.
Where you're expecting there's going to be a table of food where you can go and get a granola bar in between takes, and you're
Mhm.
also expecting that there's going to be cocaine available on the
Right.
set.
Right.
And I remember there was a Hollywood Reporter writer who talked about it was, in some ways, it was an expected, or it was a necessary part of doing business. If
Yeah.
you're going to be in business, you got to have this,
Yep.
you know?
Yep.
And so, Gary, I, in a lot of ways, I look at his Hollywood compound as being like his basement at 330 Center Street, where
Yeah.
he's like, okay, I don't have a car. All the gamers live in Chicago. There's only a couple around here, and everybody else has to travel. How can I make my basement a destination? And
Yeah.
it's like, I'll build a sand table. I'll build this like deluxe gaming surface that nobody else has. And they're going to drive hours to come here and play in my basement because I got the sand table,
Right.
So
Right.
it's like he doesn't just get a house, he gets a compound in LA,
Yep.
and there's going to be the drugs available. There's going to be, women running around on the compound, and it's just going to be a very attractive gathering place.
Yep.
So it was like a Hollywood Gen Con. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Exactly.
he's
Exactly.
gathering the people under the rules of this game. This is the Hollywood game. What are the rules?
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
what needs to happen? And
Yep.
so by those standards, it's really completely expected, or
Yeah.
it's rather completely predictable that he
Right.
would make a
Right.
move like that.
Right.
And actually, in some ways, I believe that he probably would have succeeded if he had either a little more focus or the right person to write his movie script, or
Right.
if one other decent kind of piece fell into place for him, I think
Yeah.
it could have been interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
there's
oh,
so much luck can be involved in these things as well. Right.
yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
So.
But I feel like in that era, you're looking at, George Lucas is minting money with franchise action figures and merchandising and all that stuff. And, Gary finds himself with a franchise that
Yep.
people are completely compelled by. So it
Yep.
is 100% reasonable to think that he would be able to turn that into, one of those gigantic things.
Yeah.
I think it would have taken it would be quite a feat, to make that happen, but it was not impossible. And it was just another gigantic, lofty dream.
Yeah.
He reached one plateau, and then he's looking up to the next giant peak that he wants
Yep.
to summit.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it could have happened, right? It wasn't inevitable that it didn't. Bradford's question. Okay, so was the local gaming scene organized around isolated groups, or did they network into a larger scene where players and events moved across tables? So that's what he
So
was
this is in the era of what I'm
Yeah.
guessing, like the early days.
Yeah, late 70s,
Yeah.
early 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, or late 60s, early 70s, are we talking about maybe?
He said from chainmail to TSR. So that would be late
Okay.
70s, right?
Yeah, chainmail was early. I think chainmail was 72.
Yeah. Okay.
So largely the way that they were communicating back then was fanzines. You know,
Right.
there was a ton of fanzines going around, and people were very serious about the research and the articles that they wrote. It's fantastic. Just thinking about it, you're looking at these old mimeographs from 50 years ago, and to think that they were that assiduously written for an audience of 100 people. You
Yeah.
know, it's
Yeah.
just like you have to be so passionate, and those people were all so smart. But yeah, John Peterson talks about that this was the whatever the smoke signals. This was the way that ideas were exchanged, and outside of that, it was conventions, you know, which
Right.
were not really a thing until Gen Con.
Right. Which
Um,
Gary created. Right.
right, which is unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and you talk about that. That between, and this is something that I've heard you impress a number of times, that between Dragon Magazine and what the RPGA
RPGA. Yep.
and conventions,
Yep.
you know, that you had these this sort of whatever extremely impressive and stable object that promotes the game.
Yeah. Well, Dragon Magazine, I don't know how often I've talked about this. Dragon Magazine was the direct inspiration for The Escapist. Like
Wow.
if you look at Dragon Magazine, they used to have the cover was always a really beautiful image, and then they would always have some like short little headlines of what was going to be in the magazine, and
Right.
often it was double entendres or puns, right?
Right.
And if you go back and you look, when we launched The Escapist, we launched it originally it was with PDF issues as well as with web articles.
Wow.
So
Cool. I didn't know that.
it had PDF issues, and each issue it looked like Dragon Magazine. We had a cool fantasy or sci-fi image, and then we had like kind of like little punny headlines. It was totally inspired by Dragon.
That's amazing. You know, it's funny. I knew it was called Escapist Magazine, but I never thought of it as I never really connected that it was an actual magazine. I thought
Yeah.
of it as just sort of the, you know, the
So
site that had the news and the videos and all this amazing stuff.
yeah, it started as an actual PDF magazine. So
Wow.
yep,
Wow.
yep, and it came out as a PDF every week, and we did that for 2 years. And then what happened was we went into video, and when we went into video, it went within a month. It grew in order of magnitude by 10x the size of the publication.
Wow.
And at that point, we had to make this really tough decision. Like, do we continue funding this very expensive magazine,
Hmm.
or do we take that budget and do we reinforce the success we're having in video?
Right.
And it was tough, right? Because like there was this sort of vision of being this long form, really beautiful editorial, but it was pretty
Hmm.
clear. It was pretty clear even in 2007 that the future of the web was going to be video. And
Right.
so we leaned into video, and the rest kind of was history. And so we stopped doing the magazine issues. We kept the articles, obviously, but
Right.
they were just more standard web articles at that point.
Yeah. Just
So
another interesting connection. It was when I was doing the Brain Eaters Bible, there was a buddy of mine who went to this get together called Comic Book Sunday.
uh-huh.
And it was just people would bring comics to, you know, to trade and look at, and people stood around talking about comics. And I wasn't a comics guy, but I dug the crowd, and I'd just written this book.
Yeah.
And these people introduced me to Satine,
Yep.
who I knew, who was running like streaming games for charity.
Right.
And I hit it with my ACKS, which was
Yep.
one of the first. I don't know if was there ever an actual play series
It was the
before
first.
that.
It was the first. Yep.
I remember how interesting that was.
Yeah.
I was kind of baffled at how interesting it was to watch people play D&D, and they were short episodes. It wasn't like the real long form stuff that they do right now. But
no, that's right.
But and I actually asked her about you, and it's like, is he a guy that I could pitch? You know, it's like this site is amazing. This content is so cool. And that's how I connected with you about Dark
I did not
Secrets.
know that was how. So
Yeah.
via Satine, that's awesome.
Yeah, she is a super connector. I mean, I think probably Matt Mercer's first streaming games were Satine Phoenix events.
Wow.
And Taliesin was there too, and I think maybe one or two other members of that cast. But it's funny to think about now. Matt Mercer is like the multimillionaire game master, which was like just an impossible dream for us,
Yeah.
growing up in the 70s.
Yeah. That is so wild. Yeah, so Satine was, she ended up being kind of this like breakout star from, I Hit It With My Axe, right? And ends up getting the job at Wizards and et cetera, et cetera. So it was
Yeah.
a fun show. It was a
Yeah,
fun
we
show.
actually interviewed her for the movie as well.
Yep.
She's in it, I think, for just like 6 seconds or something like that, because the direction of the film changed after the interview. Initially, we thought it was going to be about D&D and the history of it and how it affects people's lives,
Right.
but it ended up being very Gary focused, and so
Right.
it was, But she gave us a great interview. It was very very interesting, kind of her journey with D&D and whatnot. Fascinating stuff.
Well, now that you brought it up, I think we have to talk about this. So,
okay.
Rumor has it that all of the best people in Hollywood secretly play role-playing games.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but then other rumor has it this isn't necessarily the case, and some of them are just fake gamers. So, we need to hear it from you who were there. You served multiple tours of duty on the front lines of Hollywood. Who were the true gamers of Hollywood, right? So if you're going to pick, if you're going to call Hollywood stars for your ideal Dungeons and Dragons session in your basement, who do you call? Like, is Vin Diesel one of the guys?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know that I guess, one of the ways that you can really sniff out an OG is like, who was doing it before it was cool? Because it became pretty cool,
Right,
and suddenly everybody has always been playing all their life,
right.
You don't know who to believe. But I remember Peter Guber and there was sort of a PBS like film show that was a half an hour that was on cable years and years ago. And I think it may have been like around 2008 or something like that Vin Diesel was on there talking about Dungeons and Dragons. And I remember just being very impressed that even at that time, it was kind of, I remember kind of poking my head up, like, is it okay to talk about this? Is this just like, it's like, can we do that without, having people look at you sideways? Because, as there was a time when you tried not to bring it up at all. It was just looked at as so weird.
Yep.
But that he would talk about it so openly as an influence.
Yeah.
With these are serious film guys. He's talking about D&D.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, that's as legit, I think, as it gets, because he's kind of sticking his neck out, talking about this weird thing.
Yeah.
And so, I'd say he's 100% legit. And the other name that pops to mind is Deborah Ann Wall, who came to the game more recently, and she admits that readily. And I only met her once, but I really get the impression that she gets it. Like D&D speaks to her.
Yeah.
Like it does to us OG nerds who it's just. It's an influential game, and if it gets to you all the way to your core, it's I think she's one of those people. And the others, I feel like Matt Mercer, being at those games, at Satine's games back whenever that was, 2008 or 9, something like that.
Yeah.
This was 4th edition, so this is kind of, you're working kind of with a terrible,
right.
matrix here that you're operating in, But Matt Mercer was so in it when there was nothing to gain. There was nothing to gain. He wasn't trying to jockey for a thing or whatever. He was just like, he was on his feet, just a fully animated, fully engaged, highly prepared game master who clearly fucking loved it, So whatever, sometimes there's news that comes out that's critical of those guys or whatever.
Right.
But I think, what? Matt Mercer is legit to the marrow, so I never begrudge his success, because I know how early he was passionate about it when there was nothing to gain. And Taliesin, I believe, also was part of those early groups.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other people, in terms of bigger names. Yeah, that's I think Stephen Colbert.
Yep.
I think he almost certainly was a real aficionado, but I don't think that carried over into his
Right.
his you know
Yeah.
post Colbert Report life.
You know who I found out was a hardcore gamer? This blew my mind. You ready for this one?
Okay.
Peter Cushing.
Oh, right.
Grand
Okay.
Moff Tarkin.
Right.
Right?
I,
Yep.
I saw the old the newsreel, the
Yep.
BBC or whatever it was.
Yep. And he had this
Just
huge collection of miniatures, and he
yeah.
played miniature war games. Like,
Right.
and I was like, I've always felt a close kinship with Grand Moff Tarkin. He's my spirit Grand Moff. And so when I discovered that Peter Cushing was a gamer, it all
Oh,
clicked
he's
for
an
me.
absolute badass. I mean, the vampire hunter. I
Right?
mean, you don't get better than
No,
that.
you really don't.
And I think that anytime he's a serious man. I think
Yes,
that's
that's
one
right.
way to put it. And in that video, he's dressed like a perfect gentleman, and this is a pursuit for adults. He's like paintings, and there's the newsreel guy saying,
Yeah.
talking about it is with great sincerity that he sits and paints his miniatures to reenact.
Yep. Yep.
And it makes you. And I felt that way about playing at the world. It's like this is grown up stuff.
Yeah.
It's like this is
Yeah.
this is something that pays respect to the depth and value of what we love.
All right. So we got a question. We got a question for you to talk about your background.
Mm.
Did Pat ever explain how he got into gaming? What his first games were? What games he plays today? Sorry, my dog is attacking me here.
Oh, that's all right. No, that's
I'm like shaking like this because Maximus is attacking me.
I was
All
thinking
right.
you look like kind of like you're in the well at James Gumm's house from Silence of the Lambs, like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Like he's gonna lower a basket down there. But
Right.
yeah, I started in I'm not sure if it was 78 or 79. I think it was 79.
Okay.
And it was the Holmes box set. Yeah, and it was there was a kid, yes, a kid from England who lived in our neighborhood had this thing, so it felt extra exotic, like maybe it came from overseas, but it was in hobby shops all over the country.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was that, and I was a magic user, and it was only a one session experiment, so I didn't have a name. I didn't know you had to name your character really.
Right.
And I imagine the magic missile like actually being a little missile, like a little like ICBM shaped,
Yep.
But yeah, I was so compelled by it that when we had to leave the house, we kept playing by phone. We got together on the phone and we're still playing.
Oh, wow.
So that's how it started. And I talk about this in the featurette, the making of the documentary as well. That yeah, it was after that, it was like paper route money was used to buy books and miniatures, and the Christmas lists were all like, okay, I got to knock down the next book, and school was kind of rough for me. I just wasn't I just didn't have a comfortable time in middle school and high school, and so D&D is where that energy was poured. So it was D&D, and then in the early 80s or 84, whenever it came out, Twilight 2000 was a big one for us.
Oh, yeah.
So we often toggle back and forth between D&D games and Twilight 2000 games.
Yep.
And it was Twilight 2000 that really got me building algorithms for my own rule sets.
Right.
I just got fascinated by cracking the code of how to do accurate 2-hit at range when you've got the variables of the marksman's accuracy and then the bullets inherent accuracy and scope or no scope, and so that kind of became the starting point for me. And I play now every week, we try every 2 weeks. It usually ends up being about once a month with my old group from the 70s.
That's amazing.
Still. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, we play that system. So
that early 80s was a heyday for simulationist games, right? Like they really took seriously that they were trying to build fantasy or science fiction worlds, Traveler, Twilight 2000, Rollmaster, and people look back on it and they kind of mock it as too much crunch or whatever. But I remember learning long division just to be able to calculate combat ratios and stuff like that, right? It was awesome. or like Traveler, and I'm like learning vector math in order to be
Yeah.
able to do 3D spaceship battles. Oh, it was so good.
There's nothing more motivating as far as having to learn. I remember I had a business internship in college, and we used Lotus 123, the spreadsheet, the precursor, predecessor of Excel, basically.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, it's like, I got to get this home and start
Yeah.
plugging my gun algorithms into it.
Yep.
But
Yep.
yeah, so fun and so gratifying too. It's like doing a Sudoku puzzle or a crossword puzzle where when you lock in the right math to do
Yeah.
something just the way you want to do it, it's like, oh, it's like the right song for a singer, or it's just like
Yep.
the endorphin is just so satisfying.
Totally. So John says, best early RPG designs were by the generation of designers who cut their teeth on miniature or hex encounter war games. GDW was a powerhouse for
Oh,
sure.
yes. GDW, great stuff.
Yeah. Or like, do you remember Greg Kostikian? So,
Sounds familiar, but
he did, was a designer in Paranoia, Star Wars D6, and he did also Price of Freedom, which was the GW's or West End Games, like 1980s Red Dawn type RPG. So
sweet.
he was a buddy of mine. He was right at that intersection of war game and role playing game. Yeah, just a really great era of game design.
Oh, I didn't mention in '86, I think it was, one of my a guy named Ron, one of my I don't know if he wants to be outed first and last name, but he's one of my game group. He and I wrote a supplement for Twilight 2000. We actually called them. We called their offices in
Yeah.
Bloomington, and it was, I don't know if it was Lauren Wiseman that answered the phone, but one of the principals answered the phone. We just kind of couldn't believe it,
Right.
And he kind of told us why it just wasn't feasible. And we were literally kids. I mean, we're
Yeah.
16, 17 years old.
Yeah.
But we wrote this thing, and we
Yeah.
called it Tools of the Trade, a comprehensive guide to the weapons of World War III.
Amazing.
And we spent the whole summer researching, and we got a buddy of ours to do illustrations, and it's like 100 and something pages. It's comb bound, and we brought it around to the local hobby shops, and they sold it. And it was actually selling, but then I had to go off to college. I'm convinced that had I not gone to college, that I would have then that would have been my trajectory.
Yeah.
And so interesting that I had to go to Hollywood and all this stuff to before I'm back.
Right.
To where I was basically when I was 17 years old.
So 16 years old, I wrote my first published article, Interface Magazine for R. Telsorian Games.
Nice.
Facing the Consequences, and it was about how to make your Cyberpunk 2020 games gritty and really make
Awesome.
make the players feel the pain. And so I end up, my first ever Gen Con, I end up as a volunteer for R. Telsorian Games, running Cyberpunk official scenarios, hanging out with Mike Pondsmith, who was at this point, at that time, he's like the coolest man in the game industry, right? He's like this
Perfect.
awesome black dude, and he's like running Cyberpunk in his mirror shades and leather trench coat.
Awesome.
And they've got they've built this entire city that you're running on with little skyscrapers and little miniatures you're moving around the map. And he goes on to work in the video game industry, does Cyberpunk 2077, etc. Yeah, and I was like, this is amazing. This is totally what I want to do with my life.
At that age,
massive derailment, and come back to it 30 years later,
It's unbelievable. How did that happen? Did you just submit? Was there a portal for you to submit your stuff freelance, or how did they get their hands on your article?
Yeah, so I bought the first issue of Interface Magazine at my local game store, and they had you can submit articles, and I got on my Commodore 64 and I wrote an article. I mailed it to them.
We did our supplement on a Commodore 64. We dot matrix printer and
exactly. The dot matrix printed that shit, sent it in, got
Sweet.
it, got it published, and yeah. And here was really funny so I go to West Point, and I was really proud. I had done this, and I was and I'm like, having this kind of a tough time, and there's like this upperclassman who's, kind of a hard ass, and I'm having like a tough time with him. He's our, I think he was like our battalion XO, and I'm kind of looking at his name. I'm looking at his name tag, and then I'm looking at his name tag, and then I say, "Sir, are you the Mr. Hong who wrote the article for Auto Duel Quarterly, The Phoenix Rising?"
Oh my God.
And he like looks at me, and he's like, "How do you know that?" I'm like, "Sir, I have that magazine, sir." And turns out, motherfucker had been this guy, Francis Hong. This guy had been a freelancer for Steve Jackson Games at like age 17 before he goes into the academy.
Wow.
And just like me, and then he goes in and he ended up having like a very successful military career. I believe he ended up in the FBI, etc. But it was like such a wild moment. Like there was this weird like freelancer into the military pipeline or something. I don't know. Yeah. But
And
that was,
it sounds like he felt a little bit busted,
he did. He did.
like a
Yeah.
little bit like you'd pantsed him, like, hey, you're a nerd, aren't you? Just like
Yep.
me.
Yep. Yep. Because
Wow.
he was really elite. He was like marked for flag officer. He was a very high performer.
Wow.
And I was not. I was kind of like the schlubby underperformer. But I had essentially a photographic memory for game designers. So I was like, I read your book. It was like that Patton and Rommel,
Yeah, right. You magnificent son of a bitch.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Wow, how cool. I was thinking about, you're talking about that guy who was running the game, and the mirrored sunglasses, and the incredible spread of miniatures and buildings and stuff, and especially if he was a little bit older than you, how, like, there was a game store in town that had this bunch of really cool guys sitting around sculpting
Yeah.
and painting, and
Yep.
and just sort of the mentorship. I don't know. There's something aspirational about somebody who loves the same thing you do, but
Yep.
they're 10 years older, or whatever it
Yep.
is, and they give you a window into a future that is not accounting,
Yep.
or it's,
Totally.
yeah.
Well, so my older brother, who is actually on this chat, actually, what's up, Will? Was the one who taught me to play role-playing games. So I was like 5, 6 years old. He was not 8.5 years older than me. He learned to play in the high school D&D club, teaches me to play as his younger brother, and introduces me to some of his gamer friends. And he goes off to college, and I keep playing role-playing games, and I'm like a child prodigy of role-playing games, basically. And at a certain point, his old buddies needed a game master, and so my brother was like, "Oh, you should ask Alex to GM. He's a really good GM." And so here's me, like freshman in high school. I basically got these college kids picking me up like Friday
Wow.
night, picking me up and taking me on college campus, and I'm running for the college gaming group as the GM. And so I'm like, well, this is amazing, right? And they've
Right.
got like hot college girls who are like trying to bribe me into making their characters more powerful. And so in my mind, I'm like, role-playing games are obviously the coolest thing in the world.
Right.
And and so the cognitive dissonance between how I'm treated in high school and then how I'm treated like on the weekends is just, totally fucks with my head. It was pretty
Sure.
funny. Yeah.
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 It's a superpower,
Yeah.
I think that, that was a window into your nascent leadership,
Yeah.
your sort of nascent productive future as a creative person, and as a company builder, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's fun. And they talk about that in life, how you're supposed to kind of keep your eyes peeled for those moments where it's like, wow,
Yeah.
I never expected people to respond like that, or just you stumble. Robert Greene talks about this in his book Mastery,
Mm-hmm.
where there will be the world gives you feedback that you don't expect, and how you got to keep your radar tuned to that,
Right.
and not
Right.
just blow past it.
Right. Yeah. And you I think you alluded to this earlier, but I feel like so much of everything that I know in my life, I learned because of my love for games in one way or another, right? Like, how do you use Excel, or, military history, or all these things? It was like this amazing pastime. And it makes me kind of bummed out nowadays when feels like there's so much pressure to reduce what the game is. Like, no, you got to dumb it down. No, you can't make it too complex. No, you got to simplify it. No, you got to make it they could just play and walk away and forget about it. And like
Right.
if that had been what the games were, they wouldn't have meant anything to me the way they
Right.
did.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That it's like chess, where the checkers chess thing, where it's like chess can suck you in
Yep.
and consume your brain in a good
Yep.
way, bad way for some people. But it's like its complexity is what makes it so compelling
Exactly.
to brilliant people.
Exactly. Who's the Bobby Fischer of checkers?
Right. Yeah,
Right. Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that outside of stand-up comedy, like a stand-up comedy is an amazing experience because you live with the comedians you're working with typically. A
Really?
lot of times you'd be in a condo. The
Oh,
comedy
wow.
club does not want to pay for a hotel,
Yeah.
so they just rent a condo, and the 3 comics who are performing at the club that week are staying in the condo. So
Oh, wow.
you're like in a cohabitation situation with these really interesting, really lateral thinking,
Yeah.
creative people. And then the next week there's 2 new guys, and you're getting their points of view. And outside of like the stand-up comedy world, the gaming world, and in particular, I think role-playing games, but
Yeah.
like highly intelligently designed role-playing games.
Yeah.
Fascinating people,
Yeah.
fascinating people to talk to. It's like the high you get, the kind of company you can keep in terms of the kinds of
Yep.
conversations you can have is
Absolutely.
top tier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I see. You should join the Autark Discord. We have a great Discord, and some of the conversation is just so randomly high IQ. It's absolutely hilarious. Like you just
Right.
like drop into a channel and you're like, oh, what are we talking about today? And it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, it can be scary. Yeah. Some people go deep.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
And that's what I love about the hobby, right? And it's one of the last hobby. I feel like it's one of the last hobbies that's really resisted the great enshittification of everything.
mm,
Do you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? Right.
Totally.
So,
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a celebration of, yeah. And along those lines, there are so many different ways you can focus and within the hobby. Like you and I are like math guys. It's like, what's the algorithm? It's like,
Yep.
how do I
Yep.
simulate this? How do I make it like interesting and real enough, but still playable and without having to pull out a calculator? But there are other people who are like, I'm going balls out on miniatures, and
Yeah.
like you see some of these guys have pages, and there's a guy, Warlock of Lead Mountain, I think is his
Uh,
Instagram handle, and I was following his blog for a long time. I really should check in and see if he's posting there. But he takes old miniatures like from Grenadier and
right.
heritage models, and he cleans them up beautifully. If there's like a bent wavy sword,
Right.
he'll like cut it off and like sculpt a new one. And he makes each of these miniatures their best possible self. So it's
Yeah.
like he's facing the challenge of, okay, there's this imperfect creature, this miniature that's got lead rot and all these
Yeah.
other problems, and he turns it into at once a brilliant kind of work of art and also an incredible tribute to the old. He talks about the sculptors and like when it came out and all this stuff, and that's just like one tendril of the hobby,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he's gone all in the most
Yep.
incredible way. And there's the dungeon master who paints the picture and has I mean there are so many things that you
Yeah.
can express like
Yeah.
to the highest degree.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a really beautiful hobby in the truest sense of the word, right? It's it's not a pastime, right? A pastime is literally you're just passing the time, right?
Right.
I've never felt that way with tabletop games. It's always been I'm investing my time and I become a better person from the things I've learned and done, whether it's, the hand-eye coordination of painting those miniatures, right? Like, I'm convinced if you wanted your kid to grow up to be the world's greatest demolitions expert, you like freaking put him into Warhammer miniatures when he's young, right? He's going to be like,
I mean, I feel like the stuff that I'm not one of the great painters,
no,
but it's like I have Dremel tool, epoxy putty, all kinds of tiny manipulative tools, and there's a whole skill set of. I mean, I can fix any little thing in the house.
yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I mean? The way that it can make you handy
Yeah.
is, just and when I did Dark Secrets, that alien skull, I collaborated with Dean Jones, who was a makeup designer on that thing. But
Yeah.
I was like, I had my epoxy putty and my Dremel tool, and I'm putting the
Right.
teeth in. I was
Right.
painting it, and these were 100% D&D hobby skills.
Right.
All of it
Exactly.
just like translated 1-to-1.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was so fun seeing that, seeing that play out like on this kind of grown person stage, with doing
exactly.
a TV series.
Exactly. So, well, man, we blew through our 90 minutes.
Oh, yeah,
God.
looks that way.
Yeah. Well, we had some people join late, so we should reiterate what we talked about at the start, which is
Sure.
we've been chatting with Pat Kilbane, actor, comedian, gamer, filmmaker. So Dreams in Gary's Basement, Gary Gygax and the Creation of Dungeons and Dragons. Where can they find it?
They can go to rpghistory.net, and it's available there streaming, or go to the Kickstarter page for the campaign, The Dreams in Gary's Basement. And there's a button there that'll take you to the Back Your Kids store. You can get the DVD, Blu-ray, or the box set with over 9 hours of bonus material.
Nice.
The Blu-ray is beautiful. We really worked hard to make that good stuff. And
yeah.
Like all of the interviews all the extended interviews feel like sort of mini features unto themselves. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And for those of you who missed it, like the talent that Pat was able to assemble to interview is just basically every single person who mattered in 1970s and 1980s RPGs, with very few exceptions because they were out of the country or had passed away. But pretty much, like, if I had a laundry list of dudes I wanted to meet when I was a kid, like, you interviewed them all. So
yeah, it was super fun. Super fun.
Absolutely epic. So, well, Pat, we should have you back on the show to like do simulation in games or something like that. Like, I feel like we have so many more topics we could talk about.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, we didn't get into like the deep dive on effective massive center of percussion and
no, not at all. Not at all.
Moment of inertia and
yeah, not at all. We have a lot to get into.
We do.
You know what I've been wrestling with lately is how do you do firearms in a way that is simulationist, but also still lets you do action movies where everyone doesn't just die horribly. And it's a really tough challenge, actually.
Yeah. I feel like I've cracked that with the game that we're playing with my system, and it boils down to the 1 second rounds. You get basically 2 actions per round, and drawing's an action, shooting's an action, double taps a single action, and highest skill goes first. And part of the impetus behind that was that Navy SEALs, everyone talks about, oh, you can't play gun games, you're too deadly. It's just too deadly. It's too deadly.
Yeah.
But Navy SEALs, they're Navy SEALs and Delta Force guys who've gone on hundreds of missions. How come they're not dead?
Right.
It's because they're so dialed in. And if the guys with the highest skill go first, then even the giant monsters or whatever that are being shot at don't have the skill, that the characters have. And so, it becomes John Wick. But then the danger becomes, did you finish everybody, or did you leave that guy standing with a gun in his hand?
Right. Right.
And then that becomes the problem.
Right.
But yeah, it's tricky for sure. And the algorithms for shooting at range and the scaling of the accuracy and all that stuff, it's no joke for sure.
No joke for sure. Yeah. So we got to do an episode on that one.
Yeah, love to
for sure. All right. Well, man, I'm so glad I finally got you to come on the show.
It's a blast.
Been awesome. And everyone, thanks for joining us. This was episode 30. So this is our big 3-0.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So
I'm happy to be a part of it.
Definitely. Okay. Night, everyone.